Hello everybody and welcome back to the build. In this video we're going to do a walk around on the Speartech LT4 engine harness and show that initially laid out in the chassis. Okay, well here's a diagram of the harness I had Speartech make for me. I really needed an emissions compliant LT4 wiring harness and I contacted Justin at Speartech. And I will say they're great to work with, very flexible, and they made me exactly what I wanted. I wanted a harness laid out specifically for my SLC, a mid-engine car, and also a mission compliant harness. When you buy a standard GM Performance harness, A, there's no way you can make that emissions compliant, and B, it's really not laid out for a mid-engine car, and you wind up having a lot of extra wire where you don't want it, and you don't have enough wire where you need it. So it's a bit of a project to get those to work and make them neat. But anyway, let's take a closer look. So we'll start where the ECU is. It's on the upper corner on the passenger side of the chassis. The main trunk comes off the ECU, goes down the frame rail, and connects to the engine. Then you have trunk number 2, which is some evap components, the intercooler pump, and also the fuel pump. And that trunk goes behind the fuel tank and then into the fuel tank compartment to connect to the fuel pump. And then along the passenger side of the chassis, you have trunk number 3, and that includes a branch to connect the pedal and the cruise control system. I'll cover that in the next, in an upcoming segment. And then you have the ODB2 port where you connect the harness to the PDM and ECU. All right, so we'll take a closer look at the actual harness now. Okay, so let's just take this one section at a time. If I stand back here, I purchased the ECU and the programming from Speartech. It's for manual transmission, and it includes the software for full emissions compliance. Then they made 3 trunks for me. The main trunk goes to the engine. Then we have this trunk here. This goes to the fuel system and emissions. And then this trunk here goes in the car to the accelerator, pedal, and ignition. So we're going to look at each section one at a time. Okay, let's look at the fuel system first. So you've got a connector here. This goes to the fuel pump. This goes to the intercooler pump. This is a fuel pressure sensor, so it makes sure the PWM fuel pump works properly. This is emissions. This goes to the evap vent, and then this connects to the fuel pressure control module. And you can see everything's shielded, and also it's labeled very clearly. Okay, let's look at the ignition and drive-by-wire components. So this is a relay block, and it's a relay for the intercooler pump and also the ignition relay. And basically you get an ignition wire. So this connects to the PDM, the power distribution module, and this lights up the ECU once I push the starter button. This is the ODB2 port. This will feed via the CAN bus, all the ECU information to my PDM, which is pretty cool. Then over here, this connects to the throttle pedal, and I have a Caddy CTSV throttle pedal, which is what I liked, and they wired it accordingly. And then we have the plugs for the cruise control. So I have a full factory electronic cruise control, which is really going to be nice. It should be very accurate and plug and play. All right, let's take a look at the last trunk. Okay, well here's the main trunk, and like all the other components, they use this split wire cover, and they cover all the wires up. Everything is well labeled. There's no shortage of connectors. I guess on an LT4. A number of custom touches, like the rear O2 sensor. We've got a plug for the alternator. This ECU will control the alternator, will control the fuel pump, will also control the emissions components. The fans I'm going to control via the PDM, so I didn't need wiring for that. Okay, and then I had a couple of these things lengthened, like the MAF sensor, because the throttle body was relocated. But anyway, that's sort of the overview of the harness. Certainly a nice product, and I like the fact that Speartech was able to just build to the exact spec that I needed. Okay, with the walk around complete, let's get this harness in the car and see how well all those measurements worked out. Okay, a little bit of progress here. So I temporarily laid the harness out, just wanted to get a sense for how it lays out. A couple areas I think I'm going to shorten up, but we won't do that right away. I'll wait until I've got more things installed in the car, but let me tell you what we got going on here. So we've got the ECU connected to the factory ECU plastic mount, and that just clips off, so that's really nice. Then we have the main harness. That goes to the back of the engine, and then there's a passenger side harness which feeds the spark plugs and the alternator and a couple other items. Then you have the rear harness that feeds the fuel injection system, and then you have the driver side harness, which has some more evap components, oxygen sensor components, etc., and the map sensor. Then going here, the front harness goes through this big grommet, and I actually have access to that because I made that fuel tank closeout panel, so that's nice. I can get my hands in there, and then that wire traverses up out of the sill, and then it tees off right about there to go to the throttle pedal, and then it goes across the dashboard, and that's where the relays and the ODB2 sensor are. Okay, we'll walk around there and we'll take a look at the fuel system and a closer look in the driver footwell. Okay, here's the driver side. A couple things to point out here. Some of the custom touches really worked. For example, this is the MAF sensor. So this was extended by about a foot. That's going to wind up plugging in right around here, relative to the throttle body. And I also had the throttle body extended as well, and that's going to go sort of up top right here. A couple things are a little too short, like the O2 sensor. The O2 sensor lines are too short. The rear O2 sensors are plenty long. But anyway, easy fixes. And then let's take a look over here. This is the fuel pump setup. So we've got that rear fuel pump harness that connects to the fuel pressure control module, and the fuel pump comes out right next to the fuel tank, so that works good. And then over here we have the relay box and the ODB2 port, and that coil is probably about 18 inches too long, so I'm probably going to wind up shortening that up. And then we have the trunk for the throttle pedal, and that goes all the way back there. That's also a bit long, but I have plenty of room back there to coil it up if I need to. So a couple things are a little too long, a couple things are short, like the O2 sensors, but all in all, I would say I got about 98% of it correct. So I like this layout. I'm not going to make this permanent until I start mounting other modules in the car, and then I have to put the sound dampening and heat shield in. Then I'll put this in permanently. But anyway, as always, thanks for watching and take care.